Kat, a 28-year-old outdoor enthusiast, was last seen on the morning of September 14th, 2020. She had prepared for a solo hike in the Smoky Mountains, lacing up her worn hiking boots in her small cabin near Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Her friends, who had accompanied her to the trailhead that morning, remembered her waving goodbye with a bright smile. She joked about spotting wildlife along the winding paths and mentioned how the autumn air made the foliage particularly vivid. Kat carried a standard hiking pack, equipped with water, snacks, and basic emergency gear. She checked the map one final time before striding down the dirt trail. Her car remained parked at the lot, engine off, windows up, untouched, suggesting she had begun her hike as planned. Hours later, concern grew when Kat failed to return. Friends and family reported her missing shortly after sunset, noting that she had no history of wandering off or cancelling communication. Local authorities were contacted and a search and rescue operation was launched immediately. Teams combed the area surrounding the trailhead and deeper into the mountain paths, coordinating volunteers and law enforcement officers. The initial search found only a few scattered personal items: a plastic water bottle near a small stream, a frayed glove caught on a low branch, and a single hiking stick that appeared to have been recently disturbed. No footprints, tire tracks, or additional personal effects were discovered, heightening the sense of urgency and confusion. Witness reports were scarce and inconsistent. A camper several miles from the trailhead stated they had seen a lone figure moving swiftly through the trees mid-morning, though they could not clearly identify Kat. Another witness, camping at a different site, reported hearing a scream echoing through the mountains around dusk. Investigators treated each account cautiously, noting inconsistencies in timing and location. Search dogs were employed, but they could not establish a reliable scent trail beyond the trailhead and nearby creek areas. The absence of concrete evidence stalled the investigation, leaving authorities with more questions than answers. The local community responded with organized search parties and social media campaigns to spread awareness. Flyers with Kat's photograph were posted across Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, and surrounding towns. Volunteer hikers retraced her planned route, carefully inspecting every ledge, crevice, and hidden path. Despite exhaustive efforts, no substantial clues emerged. Authorities catalogued each piece of recovered evidence, including the glove, water bottle, and hiking stick, all of which were sent to forensic analysis. Each item was examined for fingerprints, DNA traces, and signs of foul play. Investigators noted that none of the recovered objects provided a definitive lead. 4 years later, in the fall of 2024, a hiker named Ryan followed the same trail where Kat had vanished. Experienced in navigating the Smokies, he noticed a mound of leaves that appeared unnatural, slightly raised above the surrounding forest floor. Suspecting it might conceal something, Ryan carefully brushed aside the foliage. Beneath the leaves, partially covered in dirt and debris, he discovered a small, weathered box. The box appeared to have been buried hastily, yet recently enough to be recognizable. Its unexpected presence immediately drew attention, as it suggested a tangible connection to Kat's disappearance. Ryan alerted local authorities, who responded promptly. Law enforcement and forensic teams secured the area, photographing the scene and documenting the box's location relative to nearby trails and landmarks. Preliminary inspections indicated that the box was made of sturdy material, designed to protect its contents from environmental exposure. The discovery revived hopes of resolving the 4-year-old case. Investigators examined the box for fingerprints, DNA, and other identifying markers that might link it to Kat or to potential suspects. While the contents remained unknown until officially processed, the find represented the first significant physical evidence recovered along the trail since Kat's disappearance. The return to the trail, after years of absence, highlighted the persistent uncertainty surrounding the case. Questions about the circumstances of Kat's disappearance remained unresolved. Why had she vanished without a trace, and what events led to the presence of the box? Authorities emphasized that every recovered detail could contribute to constructing a timeline, understanding the situation, and identifying potential witnesses or suspects. Community members who had long mourned Kat's disappearance expressed cautious optimism, recognizing that the discovery might finally yield answers that had eluded investigators for years. As forensic analysis of the box began, investigators considered its potential significance in reconstructing Kat's last movements. The discovery prompted renewed searches of surrounding areas, re-interviews with prior witnesses, and careful scrutiny of prior case notes. While the investigation remained complex and incomplete, the box offered a tangible lead after years of silence, raising both hope and tension within the local community and law enforcement. It stood as a pivotal clue in what had been a prolonged, mysterious, and emotionally charged disappearance. Ryan arrived at the damp forest floor near the Smoky Mountains trailhead, where Kat had been last seen months earlier. He carefully scanned the leaf-covered ground, noting the scattered debris from fallen branches and early autumn foliage. Among the decaying leaves, a glint of metal caught his eye. Kneeling down, he pried a small metallic box from the pile. The box was heavily corroded, its surface marred by rust and dirt accumulated over time. It was compact, no larger than a shoebox, yet its deliberate placement suggested careful concealment. Though discovery immediately raised questions. Had it been buried intentionally to hide evidence, or perhaps to protect its contents? Ryan's hands were steady as he lifted the box, examining its exterior for markings. Subtle scratches and faint indentations suggested it had been manipulated repeatedly, likely by hand. Inside the box, Ryan found a crumpled journal, a half-broken compass, and fragments of hiking boots. The boots bore distinctive markings consistent with Kat's footwear, providing the first tangible confirmation that the items belonged to her. The journal was chaotic, the handwriting rushed and jagged, reflecting a heightened state of fear or urgency. Each page seemed torn or crumpled, as if hastily shoved into the container without care for preservation. Ryan photographed every item meticulously, documenting the sequence and placement within the box. The compass, though damaged, showed scratches and wear consistent with frequent outdoor use. Its needle remained slightly functional, though the casing was fractured. Each fragment of the boots displayed dirt and minor abrasions matching the forest terrain, corroborating the initial disappearance scene. Ryan reported his findings to local authorities immediately. Investigators arrived swiftly, recognizing the significance of the recovered items. Forensic teams carefully examined the box, noting the deliberate burial marks on its exterior. The impressions suggested a shovel or similar tool had been used, indicating intentional concealment. Authorities began cross-referencing the box and its contents with the original case files, looking for correlations between the journal entries and Kat's known activities prior to her disappearance. Witness statements were reviewed, revealing that a neighbor had seen Kat conversing with an unidentified stranger near the trailhead months before she vanished. Investigators considered whether this individual had any knowledge of the box or its contents, raising further questions about potential involvement or oversight. The investigative process involved cataloging each item with precision. The journal pages were placed in evidence folders and sealed to prevent contamination. Fingerprints were collected from the box's exterior, though corrosion had compromised the likelihood of viable prints. The fragments of boots were measured and photographed from multiple angles to ensure a clear record of their condition and placement. The half-broken compass underwent careful examination for manufacturer markings, serial numbers, and any personal modifications that could link it definitively to Kat. As the box was transported to the forensic laboratory, investigators discussed preliminary theories. Some suggested that Kat may have hidden the items herself in a state of panic, while others considered the possibility that a third party had intentionally buried the box. The mixture of fear reflected in the journal, combined with the deliberate burial, presented a complex puzzle. Each piece of evidence added to the emerging narrative, yet simultaneously deepened the mystery surrounding her disappearance. The chapter concluded with the box secured at the police station, awaiting detailed forensic analysis. Investigators remained on high alert, fully aware that the discovery could hold critical information regarding Kat's fate. Questions lingered. Who had seen her near the trailhead? What prompted the concealment of the box? And what other clues might still lie hidden in the surrounding forest? The recovered items became both a breakthrough and a challenge, compelling authorities to dig deeper into every lead. The forest, once silent, had yielded a small but crucial secret, one that would guide the ongoing investigation while leaving many answers unresolved. Forensic experts carefully examined the items recovered from the Smoky Mountain Trail, focusing on the small, dirt-covered box discovered by Ryan weeks earlier. Inside the box lay a leather-bound journal and a compact compass. The journal, worn at the edges and smeared with dirt, immediately drew attention. Experts noted smudged fingerprints across the cover and initial pages, some partially obliterated by soil and moisture. Faint traces of blood were detected on several pages, analyzed in controlled laboratory conditions to determine origin and possible relevance to Kat's disappearance. The compass, typically a standard tool for navigation, showed signs of damage. Its needle was bent at an unnatural angle, indicating it had likely been subjected to force, suggesting a possible struggle or sudden impact during Kat's final movements on the trail. The contents of the journal were meticulously catalogued. Each entry was scanned, photographed, and cross-referenced with known trail coordinates and local maps. Pages contained cryptic notes, shorthand locations, and initials, along with fragmented sentences hinting at Kat's movements and observations. Some entries suggested she had noticed the presence of another individual nearby, while others indicated her attempts to mark the path she had travelled. Investigators began plotting these entries, attempting to recreate her last known path through the forest, correlating each note with topographical features and trail intersections. Every scribbled notation was treated as a potential clue, a breadcrumb left behind by Kat to trace her route or signal distress. Authorities re-interviewed nearby campers and hikers who had been in the area during the time of Kat's disappearance. One camper recalled seeing a vehicle parked on an unusual pull-off near the trail far from designated parking areas. The driver, according to the witness, appeared nervous, frequently glancing around, and hurriedly returned to the car before leaving. The partial license plate was noted, but insufficient to immediately identify the owner. Another hiker recounted hearing a voice calling for help, a sound muffled by distance and dense forest. Initially, the witness dismissed it as an echo or a distant wildlife call, yet investigators now considered the account significant, given the possibility that Kat had encountered someone unknown while navigating the trail. Each emerging clue reinforced the theory that Kat had been confronted by a person she did not know, someone potentially dangerous. The bent compass, the cryptic journal entries, and the observed behavior of the suspicious vehicle suggested her hike had taken an unexpected turn. Investigators mapped all collected evidence, linking locations, witness accounts, and journal entries to reconstruct the environment and potential sequence of events. Analysts considered patterns of movement within the forest, examining where the journal may have been handled and how the compass might have been displaced. Every detail, even the seemingly minor, was evaluated for consistency and possible connection to a third party present at the time of her disappearance. Despite evidence suggesting an external threat, the journal also revealed traces of Kat's resourcefulness. Entries hinted at her strategic thinking. She may have been attempting to leave subtle messages or markings to guide searchers or document her movements in case of confrontation. Notes included partial trail directions, shorthand warnings, and coded observations about her surroundings, indicating her awareness of danger and desire to create a record. Investigators considered these entries as both a timeline and a possible signal of her intentions. The combination of fear and foresight illustrated Kat's determination to survive and remain traceable even under threatening circumstances. In addition to evidence recovered from the box, authorities revisited nearby terrain in search of further clues. Underbrush was inspected, minor depressions in soil examined, and potential hiding spots assessed for hidden objects. Search dogs were redeployed, focusing on areas correlated with journal entries and witness observations. Officials recognized the challenge posed by the dense Smoky Mountain terrain, but each new detail provided the potential to connect previously isolated pieces of evidence. Investigators documented vegetation disturbances, soil displacement, and remnants of any abandoned items to assess whether additional materials might have been left by Kat or by someone who had interacted with her. The chapter reached a disturbing development when a forensic review revealed a missing page from the journal. The absence was significant. The page was expected to contain information bridging earlier entries with locations noted toward the end of the journal. Authorities considered multiple possibilities, including the page being lost naturally in the forest, deliberately removed by a third party, or accidentally separated during the burial process. The missing content became a critical focal point, as it might have contained decisive evidence regarding Kat's interactions with another individual or her planned route through the Smokies. Investigators speculated that the removal of the page could suggest interference by someone with knowledge of her movements, heightening concerns about the presence of a potential suspect. Each investigative lead contributed to a growing, complex picture of the disappearance. Forensic analysis, witness accounts, and journal mapping collectively supported the theory that Kat had encountered danger in the forest, while simultaneously leaving a traceable trail of her experience. The journal's cryptic entries, combined with the bent compass and partial witness statements, indicated a sequence of events filled with tension, fear, and calculated attempts to leave evidence. Authorities maintained a focus on reconstructing her last known actions, considering both environmental conditions and human factors. As investigators pieced together the connections between journal notes, compass damage, and witness observations, the uncertainty remained profound. While each discovery strengthened the possibility of uncovering Kat's path, the missing page presented a persistent mystery. What information had it contained, and who had removed it? The forest, dense and unpredictable, could hold additional undiscovered evidence. The investigation remained cautious, yet determined, acknowledging the interplay of human behavior, environmental factors, and the subtle traces of Kat's resourcefulness. The chapter closed on a note of suspense, emphasizing that the next breakthrough might hinge on the missing journal page and the reconstruction of events encoded within Kat's final notes. The absent page from Kat's journal immediately drew attention from detectives. Its disappearance fueled suspicion that someone had deliberately removed information, potentially to conceal critical details about her movements on the day she vanished. Investigators began retracing Kat's steps, interviewing friends and family in a methodical effort to reconstruct her routine. Each conversation focused on her contacts, habits, and anyone who might have been aware she planned to hike alone. Detectives documented every statement carefully, cross-referencing names and timelines to determine potential overlaps with her disappearance. The missing page was treated as a pivotal clue. It was not merely lost, but likely extracted intentionally, raising questions about outside involvement. Ryan was brought in as a witness. He recounted the precise circumstances of discovering the metallic box in the leaves. His description emphasized how undisturbed the surrounding area had been, a subtle but telling detail. The leaves around the box were flattened in a way consistent with careful placement, rather than accidental disturbance. Ryan noted that the box itself appeared partially buried yet accessible, suggesting that someone wanted the items hidden yet easily retrievable. Investigators considered this as evidence of intentional concealment and possibly an attempt to erase traces of Kat's trail. Each observation Ryan provided was catalogued in the investigative file, supporting the theory that her disappearance involved deliberate interference. Police expanded their search to historical records, including campsite logs and ranger reports along the trail. Unusual activity had been noted months prior to Kat's disappearance. One entry described a hiker encountering a figure wearing a mask and carrying a large backpack near the same section of the trail where Kat had later gone missing. The report had initially been dismissed as anecdotal, but in light of the box's discovery and the missing page, authorities reassessed its relevance. Investigators analyzed possible motives and scenarios, considering both opportunistic abduction and premeditated intent. The presence of the masked figure suggested a deliberate concealment strategy, whether aimed at scaring hikers or facilitating the removal of evidence. The team cross-referenced the time of the reported figure with trail camera footage and ranger patrol schedules, attempting to establish a pattern. While no conclusive identification of the figure emerged, the combination of witness accounts and Ryan's observations reinforced concerns about an external actor. Detectives examined the possibility that someone had been monitoring the trail, potentially anticipating Kat's solo hike. Each detail was carefully logged and compared against previous sightings, with particular attention to inconsistencies or unexplained gaps in recorded information. Investigators also revisited Kat's personal communications. Friends and family were asked about messages, calls, or social media interactions that might indicate prior contact with unknown individuals. Patterns emerged suggesting she may have been planning her hike in relative privacy, limiting awareness of her movements to close acquaintances. This detail supported the theory that any external interference required prior knowledge or opportunistic timing. Authorities remained cautious about jumping to conclusions, emphasizing the need for corroborating evidence before formal hypotheses could be established. The chapter reached a critical turning point when a call came from a woman claiming to possess a photograph of Kat taken the day she disappeared. According to the caller, the photo had been captured just minutes before Kat began her hike. Investigators immediately requested a copy of the image and began a preliminary examination. Kat was clearly visible, dressed in her hiking gear, carrying a small backpack. However, the background contained a shadowy, indistinct figure, partially obscured by trees. The shape did not correspond to any known hiker or wildlife patterns and appeared separate from the surrounding landscape. Authorities noted that while the image did not provide immediate identification, it strongly suggested another presence near Kat shortly before her. Disappearance. Forensic analysts began enhancing the photograph, adjusting lighting and contrast to clarify the ambiguous figure. Detectives debated possible explanations, including accidental shadowing, equipment artifact, or deliberate concealment. Every adjustment to the image revealed subtle details. An outline of a person whose posture and size suggested deliberate movement rather than a stationary object. The discovery further heightened the urgency of identifying potential witnesses or trail monitors who might corroborate the presence of someone else in the area. By the chapter's conclusion, investigators were grappling with the implications of the missing page, Ryan's testimony, historical trail reports, and the photograph. Each element reinforced the notion that Kat's disappearance involved a complex interplay of hidden evidence, external actors, and potentially premeditated concealment. The photograph, in particular, provided a tangible clue that someone else had been near Kat moments before she vanished. Investigators were left with multiple unanswered questions. Who removed the journal page? Who was the masked figure? And who had been captured in the photograph? These unanswered questions intensified the investigation, compelling authorities to pursue every lead with renewed focus. Detectives turned their attention to the photograph recovered from the site where Kat's box was discovered. The image, initially unremarkable, revealed upon digital enhancement a shadowy figure in the background. The humanoid shape was indistinct, blurred at the edges, blending into the dappled forest light. Its clothing, dark and textured, appeared to merge with the surrounding foliage, making identification difficult. Experts in forensic photography and image analysis attempted to compare the figure with known suspects connected to prior cases in the region. Despite extensive databases and facial recognition software, no matches emerged. The figure remained unidentified, a silent presence within the frame, hinting at proximity without providing concrete evidence of identity or intent. At the same time, Kat's family received letters she had written before her hike. The correspondence, previously overlooked, revealed fears she had never verbalized. In careful handwriting, she described receiving cryptic messages over the previous months, unsigned notes that suggested she may have been monitored or followed. The letters contained subtle references to being observed, and in some instances, she hinted at a vague but persistent sense of unease. Investigators reviewed these documents, noting the consistency of her observations and the specificity of her concerns. The correspondence added a new dimension to the case. Kat's disappearance might have been preceded by a period of subtle surveillance or harassment that she had tried to articulate privately, but not to friends or authorities. Meanwhile, Ryan, the hiker who had discovered the box, recalled finding small footprints near the buried items. The prints were unusual, smaller than standard adult hiking boots, but larger than a child's shoe. Their presence suggested that another individual had been near the box, either before or after it had been buried. Forensic teams measured the prints meticulously, photographing each from multiple angles and preserving casts for later analysis. The investigators cross-referenced these footprints with trail registry data, examining records of hikers who had signed in during the relevant time frames. Several individuals matched the approximate size and stride length of the prints, creating a set of potential leads. This pattern suggested the presence of a person whose movements had coincided with Kat's last known location. Authorities extended their examination of the area surrounding the box, coordinating with forest rangers and volunteers. One ranger discovered an object hidden beneath a large oak tree along a rarely used side trail. The item, a torn strap from a backpack, bore traces of Kat's DNA confirmed through forensic testing. The location and condition of the strap indicated that it had been deliberately placed or left by someone who had interacted with her belongings. The findings supported the theory that another individual had been in the forest during the critical period, potentially moving or disturbing items associated with Kat. Investigators began to consider the possibility that this person returned multiple times, deliberately relocating objects to mislead searchers or conceal evidence. As evidence accumulated, the photograph, letters, footprints, and backpack strap began to converge, creating a more cohesive timeline of events. Each element indicated that Kat had not been alone in the forest, and that her experience may have involved repeated encounters with an unidentified person. The shadowy figure in the photograph, though unidentifiable, could represent a witness, a suspect, or simply a coincidental passerby. Investigators treated it as a critical lead, understanding that even subtle details in the image could later provide connections when cross-referenced with witness accounts or new discoveries. The letters, analysed alongside the photograph, suggested a broader context of fear preceding her disappearance. Kat had been alert to potential threats, but had kept her concerns private. Investigators considered the timeline of the messages in relation to the discovery of the box and the surrounding footprints. This correlation hinted that the person leaving cryptic messages may have had knowledge of her intended hiking plans or movements, potentially positioning themselves within proximity during the incident. The combination of private warnings and observable traces in the forest created a narrative of premeditation and concealed observation. The discovery of the torn backpack strap, confirmed to contain Kat's DNA, reinforced the possibility that her belongings had been disturbed by an unknown individual. Experts evaluated the material for signs of wear or tampering, and its location under the tree suggested deliberate placement. Investigators theorized that the individual may have attempted to confuse searchers or manipulate the recovery of evidence consistent with patterns seen in other cases involving repeated interference. The integration of these findings, photographic evidence, letters, footprints, and physical artifacts, emphasized a growing concern. Kat had likely encountered someone with knowledge of the terrain and her movements. By the close of the investigation that day, authorities had established several critical points. The photograph indicated the presence of another person. The letters revealed Kat's prior awareness of potential threats. The footprints confirmed someone's presence near the buried box, and the torn strap provided tangible proof of interaction with her belongings. Together, these findings painted a disturbing picture. Kat was not alone in the forest, and an unidentified individual may have returned multiple times, manipulating objects and potentially monitoring her movements. Each clue raised new questions about the identity and intentions of the shadowy presence, further intensifying the mystery surrounding her disappearance. The chapter ended with the implication that the forest itself held secrets yet to be uncovered. Investigators acknowledged the possibility of additional evidence hidden in less obvious locations, emphasizing the need for thorough, methodical searches. While progress had been made, the combination of subtle signs and ambiguous traces maintained the tension. Someone had been in the Smokies with Kat, and their repeated presence left open the unsettling reality that the individual may still be unaccounted for. The shadow in the photograph remained a haunting reminder of that uncertainty, signaling that the investigation was far from complete. Investigators began reviewing visitor logs along Kat's hiking route and discovered a pattern of suspicious registrations. Several individuals had signed in near the trailhead around the time Kat had planned her hikes. Each recorded visit corresponded with gaps in her itinerary, raising the possibility that these individuals were monitoring her movements. Authorities compiled a timeline of these entries, cross-referencing them with ranger patrol records, trail maps, and known hiker schedules. Patterns emerged showing repeated activity near critical trail segments, suggesting that someone had been deliberately present in proximity to Kat over multiple occasions. This discovery prompted a more thorough examination of surveillance data. Distant footage from a ranger station camera revealed a figure lingering near the parking lot over multiple days. The recordings, grainy yet discernible, showed a person moving between vehicles and the edge of the forest. Investigators noted that the figure appeared to observe incoming hikers while remaining partially concealed. Analysts enhanced the video to track movements and identify distinguishing features, but the individual's identity remained obscured by shadows and clothing. Witness interviews added further context. Hikers reported a man asking unusually detailed questions about the trail's conditions, hazards, and schedules. Additionally, a van had been parked near the forest's edge for several hours on one occasion, attracting curiosity from those present. Each of these accounts contributed to a growing profile of potential surveillance and premeditated monitoring. Authorities expanded their inquiries to include past campsite records and ranger incident logs. Several campers recalled seeing lights in the woods at night, but did not report the activity at the time. Some dismissed it as normal camping behavior, while others assumed it was wildlife or routine ranger maintenance. In retrospect, these accounts provided a potential lead regarding nocturnal movement patterns near Kat's hiking route. Investigators began mapping all reported sightings, cross-referencing dates, times, and locations to build a comprehensive view of unusual activity in the area. Meanwhile, forensic analysis on Kat's backpack strap produced a significant breakthrough. Testing revealed the presence of more than Kat's DNA. A second unknown profile was identified, indicating that another individual had come into direct contact with the item. authorities reviewed potential contamination possibilities, ultimately ruling out casual contact from friends, family, or rescue personnel. The presence of this unknown DNA strongly suggested that Kat had been accompanied, followed, or otherwise physically engaged with another person during her hike. Detectives recognized the implications. She had not been entirely alone, and her disappearance involved direct human interaction. Despite extensive DNA profiling, no match to any database or known person was found, leaving the identity of the second individual unresolved. Investigators combined the DNA evidence with the surveillance footage and witness statements to build a timeline of potential encounters. They considered the repeated trail visitors, the man asking questions, the van's prolonged presence, and the unreported nighttime light as elements of a coordinated or opportunistic pattern. Each piece added weight to the theory that Kat had been under observation prior to her disappearance. Detectives also examined the terrain and travel conditions, noting locations where a second person could have remained concealed while maintaining visual contact. Ryan returned to the trail to retrace his steps and assess the discovery site. As he approached the location where the metallic box had been found, he noticed recently disturbed soil near the original spot. The ground appeared uneven, suggesting that something else might have been buried or removed. Investigators considered whether this indicated ongoing interference or simply natural movement of the earth. The possibility that additional evidence remained hidden in the forest intensified the sense of urgency surrounding the case. Ryan documented the disturbed area with photographs, noting subtle impressions that could indicate recent human activity. By the chapter's conclusion, authorities were faced with a mounting array of evidence pointing to repeated surveillance, direct interaction, and concealed activity. The second DNA profile remained unidentified, but its presence confirmed that Kat's disappearance was not a solitary event. Investigators continued mapping visitor records, cross-referencing all unusual sightings, and reviewing environmental conditions that could facilitate clandestine observation. Ryan's observation of newly disturbed soil underscored that the forest itself still held secrets, potentially containing critical evidence awaiting discovery. The chapter closed with the understanding that every step along the trail, every light seen at night, and every recorded visitor could hold significance. The investigation continued, probing whether someone remained connected to the case, either physically present or actively manipulating the scene, leaving open the possibility that the forest still concealed vital clues. Rangers returned to the site where Ryan had initially noticed disturbed soil along the Smoky Mountain trail. Equipped with shovels, trowels, and careful documentation tools, they began to excavate the area. Layers of soil were methodically removed, each sifted for potential evidence. Beneath a shallow mound, they uncovered a plastic container partially buried in dirt. Inside, remnants of food wrappers were scattered, indicative of someone having spent time at the location. Alongside the wrappers lay a small folding knife, its blade slightly rusted but intact. A partially burned map was also found, its edges singed and curling, suggesting it had been exposed to fire or heat at some point. Investigators carefully compared the recovered map to Kat's journal. Portions corresponded directly to locations she had noted, but additional markings appeared in pen that did not match her handwriting. The annotations included lines, arrows, and coded symbols not previously recorded in her entries. Forensic handwriting experts examined the pen markings, confirming the disparity with Kat's writing style. The discovery prompted a new theory among authorities. Someone may have deliberately attempted to mislead search efforts, altering or supplementing the map to obscure Kat's true movements. Each notation was documented, photographed, and cross-referenced with existing coordinates from prior investigations, with analysts beginning to identify potential patterns and inconsistencies. Interviews with local hikers and campers were revisited in light of this discovery. Several accounts conflicted with one another, each presenting slightly different observations of trail, disturbances, campsite locations, and unusual activity in remote areas of the forest. One camper described a path that appeared recently cleared, while another insisted they had seen markings near a stream that were not consistent with standard trail use. Investigators interpreted these discrepancies as possible evidence of intentional manipulation of the public's understanding of the forest's layout. The idea emerged that someone may have been deliberately introducing confusion to delay recovery of evidence or to conceal movements through the Smokies. Authorities also re-examined the original box discovered by Ryan. Advanced forensic testing revealed minute traces of soil and seeds embedded in the container's surface. Analysis of the seeds identified a rare plant species that grows only in a secluded corner of the Smoky Mountains, distant from commonly trafficked trails. The soil's composition matched this same remote area, providing investigators with a more precise location to focus subsequent searches. By combining this new geographic insight with previous map data and journal entries, authorities were able to define a narrowed search perimeter, concentrating on areas that had been previously overlooked or considered less accessible. Rangers extended their efforts along these newly identified locations, employing systematic sweeps and using both canine units and specialized equipment to detect subtle soil disturbances. During this process, a ranger discovered a series of footprints leading off the main trail into a rugged section of forest that had been largely deemed inaccessible. The footprints were irregular in size, suggesting that whoever had left them may have carried supplies or moved cautiously across uneven terrain. Measurements and casts were made, and the impressions were documented with high-resolution photography. Despite the meticulous recording, the tracks abruptly stopped at a rocky outcrop near a steep incline. The sudden disappearance of the footprints raised critical questions. Had the individual climbed a slope undetected, found shelter, or removed traces deliberately? Investigators considered the possibility that multiple parties may have been involved in manipulating the area. The combination of the container, altered map, and off-trail footprints suggested that someone with knowledge of the terrain had been present and capable of navigating areas inaccessible to ordinary hikers. This realization prompted authorities to re-evaluate prior witness statements, looking for overlooked indicators of activity in secluded parts of the forest. Patterns emerged suggesting repeated visits, with careful placement of items and deliberate disturbances designed to mislead both search teams and casual observers. The partially burned map became a focal point in constructing a timeline of events. Analysts compared burn patterns to local environmental data, concluding that the item had been exposed to heat within the last several months. The locations marked in pen indicated points of interest separate from Kat's journal entries, hinting at alternative routes, potential hiding spots, or areas where evidence may have been intentionally moved. Authorities theorized that these markings could represent a strategy to obfuscate the investigation, requiring further field verification and careful comparison with previously collected materials. As the chapter progressed, investigators maintained meticulous logs of each discovery. Every remnant in the plastic container, every irregular footprint, and every marking on the map contributed to a layered understanding of the forest's activity. The combination of forensic evidence and field observations increasingly suggested deliberate human intervention. Each step was analyzed for intent, pattern, and connection to known timelines, highlighting the possibility of a previously unidentified presence influencing the landscape. The chapter concluded with the unsettling reality of the final footprints disappearing into rugged terrain. Authorities were left with unresolved questions. Who had been in the forest, and why had they returned to move or conceal items? The narrow search area provided a renewed focus, yet the abrupt cessation of the tracks emphasized the complexity of navigating both the terrain and the human elements intertwined with Kat's disappearance. Investigators recognized that uncovering the individual responsible would require not only analytical rigor, but also persistence, coordination, and careful observation in the most inaccessible corners of the Smokies. Search teams were deployed along the rugged sections of Cat's hiking route after investigators identified a series of new footprints in steep, rocky terrain. The footprints appeared recently made, showing signs of careful navigation over uneven ground. Teams moved slowly and methodically, documenting each step and photographing impressions for later analysis. Every crevice, loose stone, and exposed root was examined, as the terrain offered natural hiding points and potential hazards. The presence of these footprints indicated someone had traversed areas previously considered inaccessible, suggesting deliberate movement rather than accidental wandering. Authorities treated the discovery as a critical lead, as the prints could connect to both Cat and the unidentified second individual whose DNA had been previously found. While following the trail, searchers encountered evidence of temporary shelter. Broken branches had been arranged to create makeshift windbreaks, and remnants of a small fire were discovered amid scattered ashes and partially charred wood. Discarded cans and other detritus indicated intermittent habitation, with signs that someone had returned to the same location multiple times. Investigators noted that the shelter materials were selected for concealment and minimal visibility from the main trail. Each piece of debris was catalogued, providing insight into the behavior of the individual using the site. Patterns suggested that whoever stayed here was observing hikers like Cat, remaining hidden while maintaining situational awareness. The presence of such a location reinforced theories that her disappearance may have involved targeted monitoring. During the sweep, rangers discovered fragments of clothing consistent with Cat's gear. However, forensic analysis revealed that portions were damaged in ways inconsistent with normal forest wear. Cuts and tears indicated that the clothing may have been deliberately altered, possibly to remove evidence or hinder identification. Each scrap was carefully collected and bagged as evidence, with notes regarding size, texture, and location of discovery. Investigators considered the possibility that these fragments were removed or discarded intentionally by another individual, suggesting deliberate interaction rather than accidental damage. Meanwhile, Ryan recalled an incident from the night he first discovered the metallic box. He remembered seeing a flashlight beam in the distance, moving intermittently among the trees. At the time, it had seemed like a fleeting observation, perhaps another hiker or a ranger performing routine checks. With the new evidence of temporary shelter and damaged clothing, authorities revisited this memory, questioning whether the light indicated someone was actively monitoring the trail. Investigators weighed the likelihood that the individual responsible for the box and the second DNA profile could still be operating in the area, observing movements and remaining undetected. To extend the search into the most inaccessible sections, authorities deployed a drone equipped with high-resolution imaging. The drone surveyed cliff edges, steep inclines, and dense underbrush that were too dangerous for personnel to navigate directly. During the flight, operators noted a metallic glint partially buried under leaves near a rocky cliff edge. The reflection suggested either a piece of Cat's gear, such as a buckle or compass, or, potentially, an item intentionally placed or concealed. Drone operators circled the area, capturing multiple angles and magnifying details to assess the object's significance without disturbing the site. Investigators emphasized caution, noting that premature handling could destroy critical forensic evidence or alter the positioning of potentially valuable items. The discovery prompted immediate discussion among the investigative team. The metallic object's proximity to both the cliff and the temporary shelter suggested it could be connected to the same individual responsible for prior disturbances along the trail. Analysts speculated on several possibilities, including additional equipment used by Cat, discarded items from the unidentified person, or intentionally placed evidence meant to mislead search efforts. Each scenario maintained the potential for significant insight into the case while leaving considerable uncertainty. By the chapter's conclusion, search teams had mapped a complex pattern of human activity in previously inaccessible areas. Footprints, temporary shelters, damaged clothing, and a metallic glint all pointed to deliberate behavior by a second party in close proximity to Kat. Ryan's recollection of the distant flashlight, combined with the drone's findings, raised questions about whether someone was still monitoring the trail. Investigators were left with a pressing need to explore these inaccessible locations further while minimizing risk and preserving forensic integrity. The forest, already revealing intermittent clues, now held the potential for additional discoveries that could illuminate both Kat's movements and the actions of the individual operating within this remote terrain. Each piece of evidence reinforced the notion that the case was far from resolved, with new challenges awaiting in the hidden corners of the forest. Excavation teams returned to a secluded area of the Smoky Mountains, where prior disturbances had been noted. Layers of soil were carefully removed with trowels and brushes, each sifted to preserve potential evidence. Beneath the surface, a rusted tin container emerged, partially concealed beneath a thin layer of fallen leaves and compacted dirt. The container appeared to have been deliberately buried, positioned to avoid immediate detection. Investigators noted the container's condition, with corrosion indicating prolonged exposure to moisture, though its contents remained largely intact. Inside the tin, 3 items were found. The first was a small folding pocket knife, its blade slightly tarnished but functional. The second was a fragment of a hiking boot, worn and soil-stained, likely belonging to Kat, but distinct from the footwear she had been reported to wear. Finally, the container held a small oval locket. The locket's surface was scratched, and inside was a faded photograph of Kat's family. The selection and placement of these items indicated intentional collection or movement, suggesting that an unknown individual had handled them with purpose. Each object was photographed in situ, catalogued, and sealed in evidence containers for forensic examination. Forensic analysis revealed further critical details. The pocket knife and hiking boot fragment contained traces of DNA, matching the unknown source identified in Chapter 6. Investigators noted that the persistence of this DNA across multiple recovered items indicated repeated presence of the same individual within Kat's environment. This discovery strengthened the hypothesis that someone had been observing and possibly interacting with Kat over an extended period. Analysts emphasized the importance of cross-referencing all recovered materials with prior findings, noting patterns in location, handling, and potential movement within the forest. Meanwhile, local hikers reported a separate but related observation. Several individuals described seeing a man at the forest edge, wearing an unidentifiable mask. Witnesses noted that the mask obscured facial features entirely, and the individual's clothing blended with the surrounding environment. The description evoked memories of earlier accounts, suggesting continuity in the presence of a person monitoring activity in the forest. Investigators considered these reports seriously, examining the timing, location, and potential connection to previously discovered traces of human interference, including disturbed soil, footprints, and altered personal items. The combination of tangible evidence and eyewitness accounts led authorities to theorize that Kat may have been forced to interact with this unknown individual. The repeated presence of DNA and sightings implied extended observation or manipulation, possibly involving coercion or confrontation. The intentional placement of personal items in the tin container suggested a level of control over the environment, indicating that the individual may have attempted to create a message or manipulate perception. Each piece of evidence contributed to a growing understanding of the potential scope of the person's involvement. The locket itself offered a particularly unsettling clue. Inside the small compartment, investigators found a tiny note, partially legible despite age and environmental wear. The note contained only a fragment of text. safe, for now. Forensic document examiners confirmed that handwriting did not match Kat or any known associates, leaving the note as a direct communication from an unidentified source. Investigators analyzed ink composition and paper fibers, concluding that the note had likely been placed contemporaneously with the container's burial. The phrasing suggested awareness of Kat's movements and implied ongoing monitoring or control. Analysts and field investigators began to integrate the various lines of evidence. The repeated DNA traces, coupled with eyewitness sightings and the placement of personal effects, suggested systematic activity rather than random chance. Investigators considered the possibility that Kat had been aware of surveillance or manipulation, but had limited ability to respond. Each recovered object, when analyzed in sequence, revealed a narrative of interaction, observation, and potential threat. The items were mapped relative to prior discoveries, connecting sites where footprints, buried containers, or altered materials had been documented. As the team reconstructed the sequence of events, the implications of the note within the locket became particularly concerning. The phrase, safe for now, introduced ambiguity regarding Kat's current condition, leaving investigators to question whether it indicated temporary protection, coercion, or a taunting message. Experts emphasized the potential psychological impact of such communications, noting that they could represent both a warning and an assertion of control by the individual responsible. The presence of the note within a personal and sentimental object underscored the deliberate and manipulative nature of the act. The chapter concluded with unresolved questions central to the case. The identity of the person responsible for the tin container, the pocket knife, the boot fragment, and the locket remained unknown. The partially legible note introduced further uncertainty. Had Kat survived recent events, or had this been intended as a cruel message posthumously? Investigators acknowledged the need to continue cross-referencing physical evidence, eyewitness accounts, and prior forensic findings to determine patterns of behavior and potential leads. Ultimately, the metallic glint of the tin container and the items within served as a stark reminder of human intervention in the forest. Each element reinforced the presence of a methodical individual operating with intent, leaving investigators to reconcile tangible traces with the intangible question of Kat's status. The combination of recovered artifacts, DNA, and eyewitness sightings heightened both urgency and caution, leaving the investigation poised between hope, uncertainty, and the ever-present shadow of the unknown. Investigators conducting further searches along Kat's hiking route uncovered additional letters carefully hidden in tree hollows, under rocks, and behind loose bark. Each envelope contained cryptic messages referencing Kat's movements, with phrasing suggesting detailed knowledge of her routine. Some letters appeared to be written in Kat's own handwriting, while others were clearly composed by a different individual, potentially the person responsible for her disappearance. The mixture of handwriting styles immediately drew the attention of forensic document examiners, who were tasked with analyzing pen pressure, letter formation, and ink flow to establish authorship. Every envelope and note was meticulously catalogued, photographed, and stored in evidence bags to prevent contamination and ensure accurate chain of custody documentation. Experts in forensic ink and paper analysis examined the materials and concluded that the letters had been written at different times over the past 4 years. Variations in ink composition, paper aging, and writing implements indicated a prolonged pattern of communication or observation. The findings suggested that the person responsible was not only patient but familiar with the forest's terrain, capable of discreetly placing letters in concealed locations without being observed. Investigators noted that the letters' content often referenced precise trail locations, landmarks, and times, indicating someone with intimate knowledge of Kat's hiking habits. This evidence reinforced the theory that the forest itself was being actively manipulated by an unknown individual to guide or mislead searchers. Local residents were interviewed to determine whether similar incidents had occurred in the past. Several recounted hikers or campers reporting mysterious notes or objects along trails, though none matched the profile or severity of Kat's case exactly. Some locals recalled small-scale disturbances, abandoned tents, items left in unusual places, and fleeting sightings of figures moving through the woods at night. While these accounts did not provide direct leads, they established a pattern of unusual activity over time, demonstrating that the area had been under intermittent observation by unknown parties. Investigators cross-referenced these reports with trail logs, ranger patrol records, and visitor registrations, looking for correlations that could narrow down potential suspects or motives. Meanwhile, Ryan recalled seeing a suspicious campsite during his previous visits, located on a ridge near the original discovery site of the metallic box. The site appeared temporary, yet deliberately concealed, positioned to overlook sections of the trail without being easily visible from common paths. Ryan's memory of the campsite added context to the letters, suggesting that whoever had left the notes may have also established a semi-permanent observation point nearby. Investigators mapped the ridge in relation to the box and other items previously recovered, identifying vantage points and access routes that would have allowed covert activity. The ridge's proximity to multiple discoveries made it a high-priority location for further exploration. Authorities reviewed all collected letters, comparing dates, locations, and references to Kat's known trail movements. Patterns emerged showing a recurring presence in specific areas, consistent with the theory that the person placing the letters had monitored her extensively. Each note was transcribed and subjected to linguistic analysis to identify stylistic markers, word choice, and potential indicators of age, gender, or education level. Experts also assessed whether references to natural landmarks or obscure paths were intended to mislead searchers or serve as genuine clues. The combination of content, timing, and placement suggested deliberate orchestration over an extended period. Preparations were made to investigate the ridge at first light. Authorities planned to conduct a systematic sweep, using both ground teams and drone reconnaissance to cover difficult terrain safely. Searchers would document all evidence, including natural markers, potential shelter sites, and any objects resembling the previously recovered metallic box or clothing fragments. The goal was to locate direct evidence that could connect the ridge to the letters, the box, or other aspects of Kat's disappearance. Investigators emphasized the need for caution, noting that the person responsible may still have knowledge of the area and could respond to disturbance. By the chapter's conclusion, the letters reinforced the notion that Kat's disappearance involved a calculated presence in the forest over several years. Each cryptic message, carefully hidden and written at different times, demonstrated knowledge of her habits, trail conditions, and the forest's geography. Ryan's recollection of the ridge provided a tangible location for authorities to investigate, linking multiple threads of the ongoing case. As the team prepared for first light exploration, the potential to uncover direct evidence or even locate Kat heightened the urgency and stakes of the investigation. The forest, already a repository of clues, now offered a concentrated focal point, promising new insights into the person who had orchestrated these actions and the possible fate of the missing hiker. Investigators reached the ridge after days of methodical searching, navigating steep inclines and dense underbrush. The location had previously been considered largely inaccessible, a rugged area beyond common hiking paths. Upon arrival, the team identified signs of human activity. A partially concealed tarp, folded over branches and secured with rocks, indicated a makeshift shelter. Beneath the tarp, bedding materials were arranged with care, suggesting prolonged or repeated occupancy. A small storage container was discovered nearby, partially buried under leaves and soil. Investigators noted the deliberate placement of objects within the site, indicative of intentional organization rather than accidental disposal. Inside the storage container, remnants of food were found: half-eaten protein bars, a small tin of canned goods, and packets of dehydrated snacks. Clothing items were present, including gloves, a scarf, and layers suitable for overnight stays in mountainous terrain. Alongside these personal items were letters addressed to Kat, some with handwriting, matching notes found in earlier recovered items, others appearing in a different style, suggesting multiple contributors or intermediaries. Each letter was photographed, catalogued, and sealed for forensic examination. Analysts noted that several messages referenced locations, instructions, or observations, potentially providing additional context about the individual or individuals interacting with Kat. The most critical discovery within the campsite was a digital camera, remarkably intact despite exposure to environmental elements. The memory card was retrieved and sent immediately to forensic technicians for imaging and analysis. Review of the footage revealed a sequence of Kat hiking along familiar trails, interspersed with short clips showing a figure observing her from a distance within the forest. The identity of the observer was obscured, as the person's face was partially hidden by foliage, hats, or shadow. Investigators focused on movement patterns, attempting to determine proximity, direction, and potential intent based on positioning relative to Kat. The footage provided unprecedented insight into Kat's last known movements. It confirmed prior hypotheses drawn from journal entries, recovered items, and witness May accounts. Kat had been hiking alone, yet an individual had been monitoring her progress. The observer appeared intermittently, often retreating when Kat's path approached or when she looked in their direction. This consistent surveillance aligned with previous reports of footprints, disturbed soil, and altered personal items. Analysts emphasized that while the footage did not reveal identity, it corroborated suspicions of prolonged monitoring, reinforcing the theory of an unknown individual with sustained presence in the forest. Investigators were particularly struck when the footage revealed the masked figure documented in prior witness accounts. The same individual, observed near the forest edge and associated with earlier disturbances, appeared multiple times in the video, moving with careful intent and remaining largely undetected by Kat. The figure's clothing blended with the environment, and movements were deliberate, suggesting familiarity with terrain and methods to avoid observation. This visual confirmation provided a tangible connection between past reports and current evidence, lending credibility to previous eyewitness statements and enhancing the overall understanding of the case. The letters discovered at the ridge were also analyzed in conjunction with the footage. Forensic document experts compared ink, paper composition, and handwriting to establish timelines and potential authorship. Some messages appeared to provide information on trail routes, while others contained ambiguous warnings or references to prior interactions. Investigators theorized that these letters were part of an ongoing pattern of communication between Kat and the individual monitoring her, possibly intended to influence or manipulate her actions without direct confrontation. The combination of visual and written evidence allowed authorities to reconstruct partial sequences of interaction and movement, narrowing gaps in the timeline of events. As the investigation continued, forensic teams catalogued each item within the campsite, cross-referencing them with previously recovered materials. Clothing fibers, soil residues, and traces of vegetation were matched against samples from prior discovery sites, including the tin container and disturbed soil near Ryan's initial find. The cumulative evidence suggested that the individual responsible had utilized multiple locations to store items, maintain surveillance, and manipulate the environment, reflecting careful planning and forethought. Each element contributed to an increasingly detailed profile of the person's movements and behavior within the ridge area and surrounding forest. The chapter concluded with a particularly unsettling observation from the video. The final frame captured the masked figure holding an indistinct object, partially obscured by shadow and foliage. Investigators could not determine whether the object was Kat herself, an item belonging to her, or another personal artifact. The ambiguity intensified concern and urgency, emphasizing the potential risk or threat posed by the individual. The footage's final frame left investigators with pressing questions about the observer's intentions and the fate of Kat, underscoring the complexity of the case and the need for continued meticulous investigation. By the end of the Ridge discovery, authorities had established several critical points: the existence of a concealed campsite, repeated human presence, correspondence to Kat, and visual confirmation of an unknown masked figure monitoring her. Each piece of evidence intersected with previous findings, creating a network of interconnected clues. Yet the unresolved final frame left the investigation poised between concrete evidence and uncertainty, highlighting both progress and the enduring mystery surrounding Kat's disappearance. Authorities focused on the extensive camera footage collected from trailhead surveillance and remote ranger stations. Each frame was analyzed meticulously, slowed to frame-by-frame playback to detect subtle movements or identifying features. Investigators concentrated on the masked figure previously observed near the parking lot and along multiple trail segments. Over repeated viewing, characteristics became discernible. Posture, gait, and hand movements suggested an individual experienced with navigating the forest without detection. Cross-referencing with local criminal records, authorities identified the figure as someone with a documented history of stalking hikers and trespassing in the region. Prior arrests and complaints showed a pattern of obsessive observation and strategic concealment, linking the suspect's previous behavior to the current case. Forensic teams returned to previously collected evidence to confirm connections between the masked individual and items discovered along the trail. Clothing fibers recovered from temporary shelters, tree hollows, and fragments of Kat's gear were subjected to microscopic analysis. DNA testing confirmed that fibers and tissue samples matched those from the metallic box, backpack strap, and other locations where second DNA had been identified. Analysts concluded that the suspect had direct physical contact with Kat or her belongings over multiple days. The pattern of evidence strongly suggested deliberate placement, manipulation, and concealment of items intended to mislead investigators while monitoring her movements. Interviews with surviving witnesses, including hikers, campers, and Ryan, provided additional context. Ryan recounted observing subtle changes in the trail, disturbed leaves, and the flashlight beam in the distance on the night he first discovered the box. Other hikers described fleeting figures in the woods, unusual patterns of light at night, and encounters with a man asking detailed questions about trail schedules and conditions. By combining these first-hand accounts with forensic and surveillance data, investigators were able to reconstruct a comprehensive timeline of activity along the trail. The investigation also revealed that Kat had attempted to leave her own trail of evidence. Notes, small markers, and rearranged items indicated an effort to communicate her movements or mislead a pursuer. These instinctive actions likely delayed the perpetrator temporarily, allowing search teams to recover the metallic box and other items containing critical information. Forensic analysis showed that these deliberate placements corresponded to strategic points along the trail, providing indirect clues to investigators while simultaneously highlighting Kat's resilience and awareness of danger. Authorities pieced together a sequence of events showing that Kat had been forced to move repeatedly, hiding belongings, and seeking temporary cover in areas identified during searches. The footprints, shelters, and discarded items mapped a trajectory over several days, demonstrating that her ordeal involved sustained evasion under duress. Forensic testing confirmed the presence of the suspect's DNA and fibers at multiple points along this route, aligning with the reconstructed timeline of her movements. Analysts noted that these findings were consistent with a calculated effort to control her location, prevent discovery, and maintain surveillance while limiting opportunities for escape. Despite the severity of the situation, investigators were able to confirm that Kat had initially survived the abduction. Her resourcefulness, understanding of the terrain, and efforts to leave traces allowed authorities to recover evidence linking the suspect to the trail. However, subsequent developments indicated that she had eventually been taken elsewhere, removed from the immediate forest environment. While the exact circumstances of her later movements remain unknown, the evidence clearly demonstrated that her abductor exerted control over her location and possessions over an extended period. Investigators compiled all findings into a detailed case file, integrating forensic results, surveillance footage, witness statements, and Ryan's observations. Timelines were cross-referenced to ensure accuracy, revealing how Kat had moved between trail sections, hidden belongings, and interacted indirectly with searchers through left-behind items. Each piece of evidence reinforced the conclusion that the abductor had been familiar with the forest, capable of strategic planning, and aware of both natural and human monitoring patterns. The analysis also highlighted ongoing unanswered questions. While the masked individual was identified, the final location of Kat remained undetermined. No recent sightings or communication had been confirmed, and investigators acknowledged the possibility that she may have been moved out of the area entirely. Forensic teams emphasized that while significant portions of the case had been resolved, including the suspect's identity and patterns of interaction, critical elements regarding her current status and ultimate fate remained open. By the chapter's conclusion, authorities had achieved partial resolution. The masked figure had been identified, forensic connections were established, and the timeline of Kat's movements had been reconstructed in detail. However, the forest retained elements of uncertainty, with its hidden paths, secluded ridges, and remote shelters continuing to obscure the full story. Ryan's observations, combined with evidence recovered over multiple years, provided insight into her resilience and the calculated behavior of her abductor. Yet the final chapter, Kat's current condition and ultimate outcome, remained unwritten, leaving investigators with a mixture of answers and enduring questions. The forest itself, having revealed intermittent clues through footprints, letters, shelters, and hidden items, continued to hold secrets that may never be fully uncovered. Every recovered object, every shadowy figure captured on camera, and every cryptic letter contributed to a mosaic of understanding, illuminating both the horror and resilience inherent in Kat's experience. The investigation demonstrated the intersection of human ingenuity, survival instinct, and criminal planning, revealing how even in extreme adversity, small acts of strategy and awareness can produce critical evidence. The chapter closed on a haunting note. While significant progress had been made, linking the suspect to multiple crimes, confirming the survival of Kat in the initial period, and reconstructing her movements, the ultimate resolution remained elusive. The forest, a repository of both danger and evidence, still concealed unanswered questions, emphasizing that the story of Kat's disappearance, survival, and ultimate fate had yet to be fully concluded. Authorities continued to monitor leads, analyze recovered evidence, and hope for eventual discovery, leaving the narrative partially resolved but still compellingly open-ended.